It was MacDonald banging on the screen door and calling his name that awoke Cletus the following morning. "Hey, you ain't gonna sleep till noon if you want to work for me," the old man informed him. By the tone of his voice, he was jesting, but there was also an undercurrent of seriousness. Cletus hurried to pull on his pants and shirt he'd worn last night while the farmer went into the barn. As the old man had predicted, he was feeling the effects of the moonshine, and it wasn't pleasant. As he emerged into the pale, watery gray morning, even that sick light seemed to blind him like two needles going through his eyeballs. Cletus was rubbing at the pain with the heels of his hand, wishing he had some of the tonic his mother, God rest her soul, used to give him whenever he had a headache, when he saw MacDonald come from the barn with several looped lengths of rope riding on his shoulders. He patiently waited for instructions. "I want you to tie a piece of this rope around one of those sows' heads and take her up to my place. Tie her to the clothesline pole by the back door." "What do you plan to do with her?" Cletus innocently asked. He hadn't meant anything by the question. This early in the morning, it was hard to think, and even harder to keep his wits about him. "I plan to dance with her, you fool!" the farmer barked angrily. His face was flushed and his eyes glittered. Too late, Cletus realized the man had also had more than a nip or two last night. "Sorry, Mr. MacDonald." "Just get one of those pigs up to the house as soon as you can. Then join me back here." "What do you plan to do with the rope?" The moment the words had left his mouth, Cletus realized he'd erred again. Twice in the same minute. Fearfully, he took a step back as the farmer eyed him with disdain. "My, you're just full of prying-itis, aren't you? What the hell do you care what I plan to do with the rope? If I wanted you to know, I would tell you, right?" "Right, Mr. MacDonald. I'm sorry." "Sorry isn't getting that sow up to my place. Now get!" Cletus half ran to the pen behind the barn after accepting the loop from the farmer's outstretched hand. The sows they'd caught a couple of days before were still asleep, so his job was not as difficult as he'd first thought it would be. He chose the pig nearest the fence, easily slipping the hemp under its snout and trailing it down until it was around the neck. That done, he quickly fashioned a slip knot to prevent the animal from wiggling out of it. However, getting the reluctant sow up to the farmhouse was a bit more of a task. It took Cletus a full half-hour to drag the reluctant animal up the slope to the back of the farmhouse, and then tie the ropes securely to the clothesline pole. His forehead dripped sweat from his exertions. His mouth felt parched. His throat burned. He had not had the chance for a quick breakfast, and his headache was getting worse. Back at the barn, MacDonald had disappeared into the structure. The pump was between him and the barn. He figured it shouldn't be a problem to grab a quick handful of water before heading back downhill. Cletus sidestepped the sow that was now rooting around the crawl space underneath the farmhouse. He walked past the back step, casually glancing at the pile of boots he knew were always there. A small detail flashed to him, a detail he could easily have forgotten if the seed of it hadn't already been planted. Cletus paused, took a step back, and gave them another good look, then another. Yep, no doubt about it, that was dried blood on the back steps, blood that had seeped out of the kitchen floor in thin rivulets and dried in streaks down the hewn stone steps. Morbid curiosity made Cletus run a finger over the dried blood. It was tacky, not yet at the flaking point. He stared at the smudge on his finger for a second until disgust washed over him and he furiously wiped it on the dry grass. Getting back to his feet, he started to head for the pump again when he glanced back at the boots lying haphazardly by the steps. In the morning light, there was no denying that one pair, with one boot lying on its side and the other propped up at a slant on top of another set, bore the unmistakable wetness of undried blood. It was embedded in the ridged soles of the footwear, oozing slowly, very, very slowly, along the patterned bottoms, as though traversing a maze. Cletus glanced down at the barn to see if MacDonald had emerged yet. Finding the coast was clear, he reached for the boots and again wiped the same finger along the heel. To his utter amazement, the stuff not only was fresh, but slightly warm.